to go ahead and call the board meeting to order. This is the MISD School District regular meeting, school board meeting, October 20th, 2020, 6 o'clock. At this point, if everybody could please stand up so we can say the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one indivisible.
Okay, so we do have we're going to start the meeting off with a statement regarding Texas Local Government Code Section 180.007 regarding proposed increase in employee compensation. Board, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing pursuant to the Texas Local Government Code Section 180.007, which requires a public hearing to be held if any payment is made to an employee or former employee that exceeds the contract amount owed to an employee or former employee. As such, this item has been properly posted and a sign-in sheet has been provided for the public to speak if they so desire. There's an agenda item on the item tonight that the board will consider a mid-year pay increase of 2% of a mid-year for all Montgomery ISD employees for the 2020-21 school year to be effective November 1st, 2020. MISD adopted its budget for the 2020-21 school year on June 30th, 2020. At that time, there was no way to adequately predict what would be required of each employee in order to safely open our schools. Since that time, the district has completed its COVID-19 reopening plan and conducted multiple reopenings due to the phased approach of having students return to campus, requiring a tremendous amount of time and planning and additional duties at every level for proper execution. The following information is provided in accordance with the statutory requirements. The public purpose of this agenda item: if the board approves the mid-year pay increase, it will serve the public purpose for the district of boosting employee morale and retaining its employees. Number two, the proposed payment to be made. If the board approves the mid-year pay increase of an amount of 2% of the midpoint, will be added to each employee's pay effective November 1st, 2020. Number three, the source of the proposed payment is the general funds of Montgomery ISD. Number four, assurance of control. If the board approves the mid-year pay increase, the approval will set out the terms of the pay increase to be implemented by the district's finance staff. At this point, we are going to call for any public comments related to this, and we didn't have any, so we'll go ahead and move on. We do have a special recognition tonight of David Ergel. David, this is going to be probably your last, well, we have one on Monday, so, yep. or probably on Monday, and so this won't be your last meeting, but we're still going to pretend like it is.
All right.
Okay. David has been on the board for 9 years, and he came on the board when Dr. Bo Reese first came on the board.
Yeah, actually Jim Gibson was the superintendent for several months.
That's right. And so actually when we were doing our superintendent search, David was a real crucial part of that process because he was actually the only one that had actually been through it before out of any of us. So anyways, over the time that I've been on the board, I've really personally appreciated David's leadership and he always, the one thing I would say about David is that we've known for a while that David was getting off the board for many months, way before May and before we knew everything that was going to happen this summer. And a lot of board members could have just booked it in and just not not really participated very much. That's not what David did. David was at every board meeting, every late night meeting that we had. So with that, I just think that just talks a lot about David's character and why he was such a great member of the board. With that, I just want to say thank you, David, and for everything that you've done. And we want to present you with this appreciation plaque.
Thank
you. It's a plaque. It's brown. And we really appreciate it. So maybe we could get some pictures.
Do I have to wear my mask?
No. Don't worry.
Texas, seriously.
Are we spending? What are we doing? We're not in the picture. Give him his plaque.
Let go of it.
Okay. With that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our consent agenda. The first was to consider the approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Did anyone have any questions about that, board? Excuse me. And then considering the approval of the school health advisory committee alignment with goal number 2. Did anybody have any questions about that? Do I have any motions?
I'll motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda agenda items have been approved. Going on to the public comments. Do we have any for tonight? Okay. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to our first action item. Considering the approval of purchase of attendance credits.
Thank you, Mr. Dotsie. This is not going to be the Chris Lund show this meeting, but we do start off with Chris. And one thing I just want to comment on our agenda, all of the items are aligned to your goals, but they are your goals that you had worked on last year. So that's why you see 4, not 5, and we'll get into that when we get to the goal discussion later this evening. Mr. Lund.
You know, Montgomery ISD has received notification that there is potential recapture for the 2021 fiscal year. And so we accomplished that by the purchase of attendance credits. And so being a property wealthy district, we are required to reduce our property wealth per weighted ADA based on 5 available options. In the past, Montgomery ISD has always chosen option number 3, which is the purchase of attendance credits from the state. And that's what we are asking for tonight for your approval to move forward with that same method that the district has in previous years. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And for members of the board, I know that you've done this before. We've done this every year. This is basically the Robin Hood payment that we always hear about.
Yes, sir. Some of the terminology has changed a little bit. You know, it used to be Chapter 41, Robin Hood. With House Bill 3, the language has changed some to revenue in excess of local entitlement, but the philosophy and the actions are still the same. Money is sent from this district to the state and distributed to other districts.
Did any board members have any questions?
Is the amount known yet, Chris?
The amount is not known at this time. Part of it is based on property tax data that is not available until January. So we anticipate notification of the amount February, March, sometime in early spring. It will be significantly lower than what the district has experienced in the past. I believe prior to House Bill 3, the district was used to $3 to $4 million a year in recapture. The amount will not be anywhere near that large this time.
Any other questions from the board? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the agreement for the purchase of attendance credits as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Second agenda item, consider approval of the waiver for alternate reading instrument.
All right, so each year, the district is required to administer reading assessment to seventh graders that did not perform satisfactorily on their sixth grade STAR. So this year, of course, we're in a unique situation. COVID has given us a lot of unique situations, and this is one of them. So they did not take the sixth grade STAR test for us to be able to know who to give that test to. So they have actually allowed us some options. The Texas Education Code actually has a set of approved, adopted tests that we normally give. But this year, if we apply for this waiver, we can give a locally determined test. And so we would like to exercise that option. We have already given our seventh graders the TEA beginning of year assessment. This was an assessment they released just for this year to help determine where those kids' gaps were from during that COVID lapse from March. So that was a good assessment for us to give. And then we also give the HMH growth measure. This goes along with our adopted materials, and it helps us see their reading growth that they have made. So we would like to do that, and so to do that, we recommend the approval of the waiver request.
Any questions from the board? Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the waiver to request using an alternate district selected seventh grade reading instrument for the 2021 school year.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item, consider approval of the MISD board goals and district performance objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Dossi. We are excited to follow up on the conversation that we had with the board at our workshop in September. If you recall, at that time, portion of our agenda was to follow up on the good work. I know you're laughing, Gary. You've trained us well. Was to follow up on the good work that had been started by the board. You have set a task for Montgomery ISD to be the premier school district in the state of Texas. And I actually had a call from a former superintendent at Montgomery ISD and said, what does that mean? And how are you all going to measure it? And have you even started that work? And I was like, stay tuned to Tuesday's board meeting. And he was pretty impressed that that work has begun. So what we're going to present to you tonight is our work that you tasked us to do around the goals, where we took the 4 goals and have suggested they to be 5, the performance objectives that would go with those goals. And then we would ask for your vote, and then we'll talk to you about next steps that we will do in reflection of that work. One thing that when people talk about, well, what do goals and performance objectives and what we're going to talk about KPIs, what does all that mean? Well, your goals really point to where you're trying to get to, and your performance objectives really speak to how you're going to try to get there. And your KPIs really help you understand, are we trending that way? And so these goals, performance objectives that you will consider and hopefully vote on tonight will be that direction for the senior team, our principals and our employees, and our signal to the community of what it's going to take for us to truly become the premier school district in the state of Texas. So with that, I want to bring up the senior staff. They have been working very hard along with our principals, and we'll start with Meredith Berg, Goal 1.
Hello, good evening. So Goal 1 focuses on academic achievement. The goal is that MISD will provide a challenging curriculum, assess individual student achievement, and support efforts to ensure excellent academic performance. The performance objectives follow. So the first, regarding student growth, MISD students will demonstrate 1 year of academic growth in reading and math as measured by Domain 2 on the STAR assessment, increasing the scale score from a 87 to a 90. The second objective is regarding closing the gaps. MISD students will close performance gaps as measured by Domain 3 on the STAR scale score from 95 to 97 for the following subgroups: African American, Hispanic, special education, and economically disadvantaged. The third objective is related to college, career, military readiness. MISD students will demonstrate an increase in the CCMR scale score on the STAR assessment from a 95 to a 97. So the next slide shows a specific example with a KPI component to it. So specifically, the second objective was about closing the gaps for those different subgroups. So the key performance indicator, an example of what could be a KPI for that objective, would be that we would focus on grade 3 ELA STAR performance % of our Hispanic students, considering approaches, meets, and masters. And then the next slide shows a visual of how that could all be compiled and then visually demonstrated. And so you can see as you go across this example of a KPI from each year to year, you would consider those scores and how they related to the scale score from the percentage of what was scored originally. And then some other examples that would fall under this first goal and the objectives would be, of course, those regarding special education. What measures do we have in place to increase our attendance? And maybe what are some things we could consider regarding discipline? We've been working with our principals to get their input. And again, this is just one example, but we've got many more ideas to come.
And thank you, Meredith. And just again, for the public who may be seeing this for the first time, the KPIs are the work that will happen once the board has approved goals and performance objectives. The KPIs that we're showing tonight often are what they could look like, and they're either data that we currently have or hypothetical data for data we would need to get, for example, survey data. Bobby, goal 2.
Good evening. Goal 2 deals with safety, and it reads, MISD will vigorously enforce policies and procedures that promote a safe and orderly environment. Under this goal, we have 4 performance objectives, and each one of those performance objectives at the present time has 2 or 3 KPIs. Performance objective number 1 is training. MISD will provide a safe and orderly learning environment and rigorously enforce all safety and security measures to ensure 100% of the staff and students are trained on all required trainings, including active shooter, safety policies, procedures, and protocols. Performance objective number 2 is MISD will perform internal safety audits at all campuses every year and external audits every 3 years at a 100% completion rate. Really, performance objective number 1 and number 2, the only acceptable score is 100% of these things happen. Performance objective number 3 is safety. Again, safety. MISD will implement best practices which will result in student, parent, and staff experiencing a safe and orderly environment. Performance objective number 4 is MISD will implement best practices related to mental health awareness and training, trauma-informed training, character education, and mentor programs. We want to show you an example using objective number 3 as what it might look like going across for the next 3 years. And these KPIs will be assessed by surveys for 3 different groups: students, parents, and staff. And we will have target objectives this year based on our safety and security audit, which is being completed right now, the 3-year audit. And then for the next 2 years, we will have internal audits to correct things to get to year 3 to our ultimate goal. Thank you.
All right. Goal 3 is related to finance and operations, and so MISD will responsibly manage the use of financial and operational resources in order to sustain equitable funding, to support academic excellence, and to provide safe, efficient operations of the district. And there are 4 performance objectives for this goal. Number 1, to accurately account for all financial transactions and have an unmodified clean audit with no findings. Second, utilize a transparent, collaborative budget process culminating in the adoption of a balanced budget. Next, ensure the district's fund balance is maintained according to the recommended range of at least 25%, but no more than 50% of the overall budget. And finally, to incorporate the operations of the district, create processes and management structures to promote effective and efficient use of departmental resources. And then an example KPI for performance objective number 2 regarding the budget. One KPI, conduct a minimum of 4 budget updates with the MISD Board of Trustees, conduct a minimum of 2 town hall meetings with the MISD community, and then finally, did the district adopt a balanced budget? And so we will track those KPIs for the next 3 years.
Hello, Board. I have the pleasure of showing you Goal 4 and 5. And so Goal 4, which you had from last year, had a lot in it. We had human capital, we had recruiting and retaining employees, we had things about communications, customer service, the culture of our district, so we split those 2 out. Goal 4 is about human capital. And so it reads, MISD will recruit, support, develop, and retain highly qualified and effective personnel. And there's 5 performance objectives under that goal. The compensation and benefit plans will be reviewed for comparability and competitiveness with regional districts. We will retain 90% or higher of effective teaching staff. We'll provide new employee and teacher support with end-of-year follow-up feedback opportunities. Provide opportunities for growth and professional development based on staff input. And attend multiple recruiting activities each year utilizing a variety of sourcing for open positions. And so an example of a KPI for that, using objective number 1, which is the increasing teacher salaries to rank in the top third of the regional districts. And you look over the 3 years, at that third year of 23-24, to be in that top third. So goal 5, surrounding communications and customer service. MISD will provide proactive and frequent engagement with employees, parents, and community to ensure effective communication, superior customer service, and a strong culture within our district. Again, 5 performance objectives with this goal. The first one is provide stakeholders effective external communication on a weekly basis throughout the school year. 2 is provide stakeholders effective internal communication on a weekly basis throughout the school year. 3, provide multiple opportunities for 2-way communication. Examples of this are parent-teacher conferences, town halls, and our parent nights. And then 5, provide opportunities for feedback from staff, parents, and students annually through the use of a customer service survey. And our KPI for Goal 5, looking at performance objective number 1, is to increase the number of followers on our various social media accounts. And so if you look over the 3 years, trying to get on Facebook up to 4,000 followers, Twitter at 5,000, Instagram 2,500, and Pinterest at 1.75 views. And those are definitely doable, I do believe, as we move forward.
I want to come back to goal 2 for a moment, because at the workshop, we started to talk about not only the importance of goals, performance objectives, but to add KPIs, and then to get to what's often known as a balanced scorecard, and why that's important for the work of this board, this district, and the community to know how our schools in the district are performing. So we're giving you, again, a hypothetical going back to goal 2 around safety. And remember, we will measure that with a safety survey given to parents, to teachers, employees, and students, asking a question, how do you feel safe at school? And hypothetically, if initially 80% of our students said, I feel safe at school, 75% of our parents said, I feel my child is safe at school, and 85% of our employees said that we feel safe at school, then we want to grow that each and every year. And we would create initiatives, we would create strategies, we would budget towards increased performance over that 3-year strategic plan. And so what you see are just some hypotheticals of, if those are the initial baseline KPIs, then you would look, and there's multiple ways that we could do this, but if you used the concept of if we attain the goal, it would be green. go. If we're close but we didn't quite get there, caution, we need to look at it and figure out why we didn't quite hit the goal. And then if it's red, it means that we simply did not hit the target. And then the board can ask what happened. Was it a resource issue, execution issue, personnel issue? And then we have to be able to explain, how we attained what you expected us to do, where we're missing it, and then what we're going to do. These KPIs, the goals, the performance objectives, give you the tools to do appropriate supervision and oversight over staff, and to really be able to answer to the community, where are we, and where are we going, and how we're progressing along that way. So there's a tremendous amount of work. I can't tell you how proud I am of the senior staff and principals, because amidst all the other things that we've been dealing with a crazy, unprecedented school year, this has been really, really good work. It's been important work. And what I'd like to now share with you, assuming that you will vote on these goals and performance objectives, what comes next. So assuming that you do vote for the goals and performance objectives as presented, the next thing that we'll start to work on is to frame out those KPIs, and then also to frame out what a balanced scorecard would look like. And we'll present some of that drafting to you at our next board workshop. I think that's scheduled for December. Then work would begin on a strategic plan. We can't actually start work on the strategic plan until the board has set our goals and performance objectives, and then we create the strategies and initiatives that will direct our elementary, middle, and high school campuses and the district efforts in terms of how we're going to get there. These goals will have committees that will help start drafting that strategic plan, and we'll start drafting those strategies and initiatives. Those goals will be led by principals, and those committees will have employees, parents, students, and community members, and it will be done by the community, and it will be a community-owned document. It won't be the board's strategic plan. It will not be the superintendent's strategic plan. It will be Montgomery ISD's strategic plan and our commitment to what we're trying to accomplish on behalf of this community. And so, again, we will present a draft of the strategic plan, hopefully sometime in the spring, for the board to consider and give us additional input. And then we will update the board in the board workshops, getting to the presentation of the finalized plan. So with that, we would love to entertain any questions or input or guidance that you have.
First, I would like to say thank you, Heath, and thank you, administrators, for all the work that you've done to put this together. The public may not know how much time that we've all spent on this. In the spring, we had two workshops, each 3-4 hours each. Then we had another one this fall. That's just the board time and all the review that we've done. And the administrators and staff has also put in many hours to put this together. So I really appreciate everything that y'all have done. I personally think that this is probably one of the most important things that we could do as a board, because when we started this process, we had some kind of goals for the district, but there was no way to measure how well we were actually doing according to those goals and see where we were at. I think that where we're at now, one of the nice things about Dr. Morrison coming in is I think he saw our vision as a board with these goals from day one, because he's done this kind of thing before. And so he was able to help you guys take the ball and run with it. So I really appreciate all the work that you've done. And as far as I'm concerned, this is probably the most important thing that we could do as a board and as a district to help us figure out what the premier district looks like and how we can get there. So thank you. Any other comments from the board? Do I have a motion?
I'll motion to approve the MISD board goals and district performance objectives as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Okay, going on to the next agenda item, which is discussion and possible action regarding proposed mid-year employee pay increase for all employees.
Thank you, Mr. Dossi. Coming in as the new superintendent, many folks in the audience and my staff and our principals know we've engaged in a process called a SWOT, where I ask what are the strengths of our district, what are weaknesses that we need to address, what are opportunities that will help us become that premier district, and what are threats. I can assure you, having spoken to over 352 individual stakeholders, having multiple community meetings, school meetings. I was at a PTO last night at one of our high schools, and every opportunity I've had to engage our community in this question, every time, without fail, the strength identified of Montgomery ISD is its employees and its students. And the weakness, almost every time, without fail, has been our opportunity as well to better compensate our employees so we're not having great employees feel like they have to go anywhere else but stay right here at Montgomery ISD. When you hired me, there were three primary focuses you asked me to look at initially. One was to reopen schools safely for our students and staff, and I could not be prouder of our employees. We didn't do that one time, we did it 4 times, and we did not try to be perfect. We set a standard of excellence, and I think each and every time we met that and continue to meet that every day. You tasked myself and the staff to finish the work on balancing the budget, desperately needed, because until you know how your budget is balanced, you don't know what else you can do, and that work was done for this year in September. And I'm very grateful to the work of our staff to bring that to you and for the board to focus us in that direction. But the third area was, as quickly as we could, to address the compensation issue. And the easiest thing to do would be to say to our employees, we know we were not able to do a raise in June when the budget was passed. And we know that this has been the most unprecedented year with unique challenges where every day presents something that a teacher, support staff, administrator has never had to think about, and yet they're having to make decisions quickly on behalf of what's best academically and safety for our students. And it would be easy to say, let's wait, but easy isn't the best way to go. And if we're going to be the premier district, then we have to protect the most important resource that we have, which is our employees. And so as we have had many, many conversations with our employees, Mr. McFadden and I were meeting with department chairs at one of our middle schools. I left that meeting to go address faculty at one of our elementary schools. They are working probably harder than they've ever had to work. And they're not complaining, but as they're doing increased work and as they're doing work that they've never thought that they would have to do to meet the needs of our students today, the inability for us to have found a way to do a raise is something that just continues to cause pressure and stress and ultimately impacts the culture of our district. And when the culture starts to be impacted, then that's where it starts to have negative effects that ultimately are felt by our students. And so our staff has taken that charge of this board to try to address employee compensation very seriously. And over the last month to 2 months, we've been looking at, since balancing the budget, what can we do to act now and not wait? Now that's not easy because, as Mr. Dossi said at the beginning of the meeting, we have to actually present a rationale for why we want to make a mid-year adjustment. We can't just do it. We have to give an adjustment and a rationale. And as was articulated by Mr. Dossi, it's not hard to make that rationale and justification with all the things that have happened in the world of COVID. Teachers teaching remote and in person. Administrators having to do everything they have to do and do contact tracing. Support staff having to think about transporting kids differently, feeding kids differently, cleaning and maintaining buildings differently with social distancing and other barriers. Our employees are working hard, and they're looking for some hope in a very, very challenging year. So we worked very hard to see if we could bring a reasonable request to the board for consideration. And we do believe that a request for 2% raise for all employees is the right recommendation. We wish it could be more. We intend it to be more in future budgets. But for this year, being a mid-year, we feel, and we've looked at this, that we can cover the cost of a mid-year raise with this budget. And then because it's a raise, it's a reoccurring cost that goes into next year's budget and future budgets. We've already started planning the work of what it will cover, what it will take to cover that cost. I don't want to say that lightly because I've said a lot to our employees. Doing the school district budget is really no different than doing your household budget. It's just at a bigger level. So just like you do when you're sitting down to do your household budget, you have to say how much money's coming in, what are the things we have to do, what are the things we'd like to do, and what would be the things we'd love to do. And as you and your household look at it, you know you have to pay the mortgage and the rent, you know you have to pay the utilities, you know you have to put food on the table, and then you hope you have enough left over to do some things you'd like to do. Put more money in the college fund for your children, get a new car because the old one's breaking down. And then when you have a little bit more money, you can do the things you'd really love to do. And back when we could travel, you could, go to places like Hawaii. For the school district, we've got to come back to the idea that the have to do is to show our employees that we are going to have a competitive wage for the important job and the performance that they're delivering. And so this is not going to be without pain, because just like in your household budget, if you're doing some things you'd like to do and love to do, but you can't cover the things you have to do, you have to make cuts. And our staff, my staff that reports directly to me, our principals, we've had this conversation and bringing this recommendation to you tonight. We have said, what is it going to take to cover the cost of this raise this year, and realize it's going to continue to be a recurring cost? What's it going to cost and cover to do that in the future? And we didn't just say, let's do it. Everybody put their hand up and said, I'm committed to getting that done. Senior staff and administrators. So we're all in. We feel this is the appropriate recommendation. We think the time is now, and I look forward to answering any questions, or staff to answer any questions that the board may have.
Well, I'll go ahead. Heath, obviously we discussed this in great length. I'm not against increasing people's pay, by no doubt. In the spring, as far as the $500 stipend, not stipend, but bonus to go around everybody. I just feel it's not time to go ahead and do this at this point. Too many unknowns, and if it was a little more targeted, I could get behind it maybe. But I think at this point, wait until the regular budget cycle to come back up and address it would be most appropriate.
Can you explain a little bit about the 2% of the midpoint, how the raise is structured based? It's not just like a 2% across the board, or
Sure. So the compensation plan that the Board of Trustees has approved has pay grades, and each pay grade has a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. And so every position that is in that particular pay grade, this raise, they would all get the same amount based on the pay grade that their job is assigned to.
so 2% of that midpoint grade on top of their salary?
Correct.
Okay.
It's not,
even if they're on the high end?
it's not 2% of
or the
the
low end.
individual salary.
Got
It's
you.
2% of that pay grade
position.
midpoint.
Okay.
So, Chris, don't run off. We just recently balanced the budget. How much is this going to, quote unquote, unbalance the budget at the end of the year, and can we afford this?
The estimated financial impact for this decision for the remainder of this fiscal year is $800,000.
Okay. All right. So, to my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Mr. Hammonds, I would say I support it. I take a lot of phone calls from teachers, a lot of phone calls from administrators who are saying they're really feeling the morale punch this year. It's really hurting them. And if 2%, $800,000, and you're saying that we still believe we'll be balanced at the end of the year, and we're going to be pretty close, if not balanced, I think it's a small price to pay to retain staff members. I know there is a risk, especially with not being sure what we're going to pay back, but I, for one, think it's a risk we need to take to keep some people around. So, that's just my side of it.
I'll weigh in on this. I also appreciate Gary's comments from earlier, because this is a very difficult decision given the budget situation that we're in. And I also definitely understand the fact that part of the way that we're covering this cost is through one-time benefits that we are one-time revenue generators for this year. But I would say, from my perspective, there's a couple of things that I like about it. One is that it applies to all employees. It's not just teachers, which I think it's often forgotten. The other staff that we have, the bus drivers, the lunch people, all those other people that need this as well. And so I think that's important. And I think that it's always scary when we have to go out on, I wouldn't even say this is much of a limb, but it's a little bit of a limb to prove this. But at the end of the day, it's all about priorities. So I think you were talking about that, Heath, in your introduction. To me, I have no doubt that we will find the money somewhere to make this work next year, because we have to prioritize compensation as part of the budget. If it's prioritized and we have a balanced budget, and we keep the balanced budget as it must happen, which is, I think we're all saying that still must happen, then we'll find the money somewhere. We'll spend less money on paper, or we'll spend less money on whatever it is. And so I believe that it is important, and it is a priority for us, and that there is a cost for not doing it. And so, the thing is that to me, it's yes, there's a cost for increasing the pay, but what is the cost of losing the teachers and having to bring new teachers in at a lower experience level, perhaps? It actually costs money to go recruit teachers and other staff. And so to bring them in and to train them up in the Montgomery way, all that has a cost. And so to me, I believe it's the right thing to do.
What does our CFO recommend?
Obviously, I was part of the discussions, not only with the senior leadership team, but also our principals. They were involved in this decision as well, because they may have to feel some of the pain associated with decisions like this. And so Dr. Morrison always challenges us to look for the hard yes instead of the easy no. And so this is definitely one of those hard yeses, because there is a financial impact to the district, and we cannot deny that. But we believe that is outweighed by the benefits to our employees. This summer has been a very difficult summer with the budget cuts and COVID and everything else that is going on. And so administratively, not just myself, but the entire team, as Dr. Morrison said, feels this is the right time to show our employees that we do care and that we are making an investment in them.
I think, Chris, it's bold, very bold, to go in short months from a deficit budget to a balanced budget to now you feeling comfortable that there's money for additional compensation for our employees is a bold record. And I think this is a bold move. And it gives me comfort when you look us in the eye and say, one way or the other, I'm going to find a way to get there. And $800,000 is a lot of money, but if you work on it, if you know that's your target and you have several months to work on it, every decision you make every day, monetarily speaking, will be towards accomplishing that goal. And I trust you on that. I think that's I think that's what we need. I don't think we're going to become the premier district in Texas without taking a lot of bold moves, and this is one of them.
It is a bold move. It does not come without risk, okay? Most bold moves don't. So there is some risk associated, primarily with the unknown in the future. We don't know what the state legislature is going to do when they reconvene in January. We don't know some outstanding questions, what's going to happen with the audit that's going to be presented next month. And there are a multitude of things that come out throughout the fiscal year that we have to deal with. But once again, we get back to what's important, and that's educating the children of Montgomery ISD. And to do that, we have to have talented people, and we have to support those talented people with transportation, with cafeteria workers, with administrative staff. And so, like I said, we feel this is the right time.
So I would offer one more comment just from people I've heard, Mr. Lynn, and it's actually not on this pay raise, it's actually on the pay raises subsequent that we saw. We're going to take us from 6th in the region to 3rd in the region. And, since we posted the agenda, a lot of folks have been commenting and really interested on this topic. And again, as I said, I'm fully in support of this. I think, what's our plan? How does this take us from, like today, does it take us to 5th in the district? Does it move us at all, really?
Personally, I don't think this is what that is targeting at this point. Some of our surrounding districts were able to give a raise this summer when they adopted their budgets. And unfortunately, we just did not have enough information and enough confidence at that time to take that step. So I think this is a down payment towards moving in that direction, okay? This is a way to show all employees that we understand pay may not be as competitive as we would like for it to be, and that we have made some cuts. We know that they were painful, but given time, we will get to our goals. And so this is just the first step on that journey. I don't think this particular raise moves the needle a whole lot. It does shrink the gap from what the districts did this summer that we weren't able to do. But it's more of a good gesture, a goodwill estimate, and saying we understand it is our goal and we're committed to go down that path.
In the interest,
It's very clear it helps us not fall further behind. It is a signal that it is a priority, and we don't want teachers or other valued employees thinking that they're going to have to wait so long that they may as well go to a district that is going to pay more competitive pay. One thing I just want to share with the board, two things, and that is something that Chris and I have tried to make sure that you are aware of, and we shared at the last board meeting. And that's the importance of a very transparent budget process. I think Chris and I have some very similar core values in terms of how we approach presenting a budget to this board and this community. We don't budget with the most optimistic outcome and then hope the worst doesn't happen. We try to look at every variable. We try to look at everything that potentially could happen that we should know about responsibly. We try to say, what could the worst be? What's that likelihood, and budget appropriately, and not have one of those scenarios, well, if everything had worked out in the positive and none of the negatives had happened, we could have done it. Getting back to the goals that you set with goal 3, when you look at most of the initial KPIs that we framed out in the performance objectives, they are around continuing to present fiscal responsibility, but then goal 4 tasks us to do that work, Matt, that you just talked about, which is to make our pay more competitive. That's going to be the challenge. There are going to be some hard decisions that we come forward with this board. It will be done with input from our employees, especially our administrators. But again, getting back to that household analogy, there will have to be less resources in some places to make sure there are more resources in this case to make sure that our employees are having competitive pay. And there will be times when, as superintendent, I will recommend pay increases that are not the same across the board. And I will do that with a lot of input. I will do that very publicly. I will not shy away from it for reasons that will be important in terms of attaining the goals that this board will set forward. But the recommendation is for all employees, except for your superintendent, to receive the 2%.
Well, Dr. Morrison, that's actually where I was going next. I've heard it from a lot of folks that say, you know, we really need to maybe target and focus. And I'm glad to hear you say that that might be on the table for you in the future. But I think in this year of all years, 2% across the board, that's something that's warranted. We can afford it. I think it's a good deal. So I want to say thank you to everyone that made it possible, especially the folks on the left, and Dr. Morrison, Chris, and everybody that kind of just tightened the belt a little bit the past few months. You know, I think this is what we got out of it.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is I appreciate the approach because a lot of people have asked us, you know, where did all this money come from that you were able to balance the budget with? And I've had questions, you know, did it come from here? Did it come from there? And usually my answer is it came from a whole lot of different places. You can't put your finger on one specific place and say that it came from one place. And because there's no silver bullets right now in the budget. We can't just figure out one place and, okay, now we fixed our compensation issue. And so I think that going forward, we're going to have a similar approach how we did with the budget to get it balanced in the first place, one step at a time. You know, okay, we're going to lop off a little bit now because we're going to make a budget cut here, and then we get further, and then we finally get to the balanced budget. And so I think that that's the way it's going to be too with this increase in compensation to get us to the goal that we want to, because there are no silver bullets. We're just going to have to keep on stepping towards that goal. So I appreciate that approach. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do this again this year, probably not. But I'm glad that we're able to do it this year. And I'm glad that we're able to get it in enough time to where it's here by Christmas and people have enough time for it to actually make a difference. So I appreciate that. Any other comments from the board? Okay. So with that, do I have a motion?
I move that the Montgomery Independent School District approve a mid-year pay increase of 2% of midpoint to all MISD employees effective November 1, 2020, payable monthly. This payment is being made for the public purpose of boosting employee morale and retaining district employees, recognizing additional duties placed on each employee in order to comply with state-required COVID reopening plans and safely reopening our schools. The fund for this increase will come from general funds of MISD. The payment will be distributed each pay period. I further authorize the superintendent to carry out such duties as are necessary to implement this pay, and I hope someone was taking notes on that. So.
An excellent motion. It's almost like you read that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
A not so easy no.
Understand. Okay, thank you. Motion passes. With that, we're going to go ahead and go into the information items. The first reading, the revision of AE local, and the other items there.
Thank you, Mr. Dossi. This really isn't a presentation as much as information. As you know, we have to have a first reading of changes to board policies. There are three, one that was not actually possible until you took action tonight. So one of the first readings is to actually change the current goals that are in board policy to the goals that you adopted tonight. So that is the first reading of that. The second is to direct approval of field trips to the superintendent. As you remember, at our last board meeting, the board went through presentation and approval of a field trip to out of state. by one of our high schools. And so the thought process was to have the superintendent still following board policy, but to be the authorization person for those field trips. And then the other area is to simply put into practice what we've been doing, which is to have board meetings at 6 o'clock as opposed to 7, which is currently in statute. So those are all first readings.
Okay. Did any of the board members have any questions about those? Okay, going on to the next informational item, required annual presentation of the 2019-20 LEP student progress.
All right, as many of you know, this year I've had a couple of new duties added as a director of special programs. And one of those is the pleasure of getting to work very closely with this next person that's coming to present. She is over our bilingual and ESL program in the district. So I just wanted to introduce her because I want to make sure everybody knows how fabulous she is. And she is going to update us on our LEP student progress.
That was very sweet, thank you. Good evening. So this is our annual requirement to give an update on how all of our students that have been identified as English learners throughout the district are doing. So the items that we are required to report on are the academic progress of our students that are English learners, the extent to which they are becoming proficient in English, any students that have been reclassified, meaning that they are no longer identified as English learners, they are what is termed English proficient or EP, and the number of our staff that work with these students. So our programs in Montgomery ISD are our ESL, English as a Second Language program, and then we also have a bilingual program in which we follow the two-way dual language model. Our students that are in ESL in pre-K through 5th grade are with content area teachers that are all ESL certified, so that is called the content-based model. The pull-out model is for our students in secondary ESL, and they are serviced through an ELA, or English Language Arts teacher, that is ESL certified. And then our dual language program is a two-way immersion program in which instruction is both in Spanish and English, and that starts with pre-K and goes through the 5th grade. So this is our data for 1920, and we ended the year with a total of 201 students that were identified as English learners. Within that comprised 8 different languages being represented, and that is predominantly Spanish, but we also had Portuguese, Afrikaans, Cambodian, so quite a few, different varieties there. Of those 201 English learners, 98 of them participated in our dual language two-way immersion program. 99 of them were served in our ESL, English as a Second Language program. We had 4 of our English learners that their families chose not for them to receive services for various reasons. And at the end of the year, we were able to reclassify 7 students from no longer being English learners to becoming English proficient. We did not have any that went in the opposite direction. We did not have any students that were already proficient that had to go back into the program, so that was a good thing. For our staffing for our English learner population, we had 13 bilingual certified teachers that served those pre-K through 5th graders. And for ESL, we have 62 ESL certified teachers that were serving throughout the district in grades pre-K through 12. And so the district has had a really good turnout with teachers getting that ESL certification every year, so we have not needed any exceptions or waivers. Our teachers have opportunity to attend all types of professional development, ranging from meeting together in PLCs for our dual language teachers. We have content area focused trainings for English learners, such as teaching science, teaching for biliteracy, so lots of opportunities for both the bilingual teachers and those that are serving our ESL students. And typically each year when I give this report, I'm sharing with you how our students did on STAR, which of course was canceled, so we have no STAR data. I also would share with you how our students did on TELPAS, which is their English language proficiency assessment that they take each year. And the district was able to begin the process of the TELPAS testing. However, due to COVID, that requirement became waived, and our deadline to finish that would have been once we would have returned from spring break, which we know was our school closure. So we were able to get the majority of our students in 2nd through 12th grade assessed in their online areas of listening, speaking, and reading, but we were not able to complete any of the writing domain. So I have for you the data of the 3 areas that we were able to complete in 2nd through 12th grade. So this shows the domain of listening, and our majority of our English learners scored advanced in this area. In the area of speaking, the majority of our learners scored intermediate, and I will say that is probably attributed to being comfortable speaking into a microphone. That's not something that students do often. It's graded by a computer, so a little different there for them. And on reading, they also scored intermediate on the TELPAS reading. The TELPAS reading is comparable to STAR assessment, so it's pretty lengthy, and it's all done on the computer, which is also something that they're not used to doing. So overall, they did very well. Our goals as we move forward into this year are to continue to facilitate additional outreach and support to our families, and then to continue to meet all of the goals to get us to being the premier district in Texas for our English learners. And I will be glad to answer any questions if you have any. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, going on to the next agenda item, which is going to be really awesome, is the board member continuing education credit report. I have completed the training requirements. David Ergel was deficient by just a little bit. Matt Fuller got an A+ because he's exceeded the requirement. Gary also has an A+ because he's exceeded. Trey, you're with me, just completed. Linda, you exceeded, and Adam also exceeded.
Adam, that's handy right there.
Does
I like the way you did that.
Does David have a deadline for
Might we
his?
see a performance objective with KPIs for the board in future years? I think it's appropriate. It's how we hold ourselves accountable.
After November 3rd, I'll take more.
We'll have an action plan for Mr. Ergel.
Yeah, we'll give him a pass.
Yeah. Well,
You're off the board.
In the 9th year, yeah, your vote, you're out.
well, training is important, and so I don't mean to make light of it. I feel we've actually had a lot of training this year, not included on this training requirement sheet, with all the superintendent surge and with Kay Douglas coming in and giving us our training as well. So anyways, okay, moving on to our second to last agenda item here on our information items, COVID-19 impact and next steps.
Thank you, Mr. Dossi. I was at one of our elementary schools yesterday, and a teacher approached me and said, "Can I talk to you about something that's not COVID related?" And I was like, "Please."
Be my guest.
But again, as I say the same things all the time, we don't get to choose the challenges we face. We just get to choose how we face them, and our district has really been stepping up. There is no playbook. No district has better answers than we do, and the best answers that we can come up with, the best serve our students and our community dealing with the challenges of COVID, is the ones that we will create collaboratively with our employees. We want to update you on how things stand with cases, how we're tracking cases, the complexities of a term I promise you they don't teach us in superintendent or principal school around contact tracing, just so you, and I know you do, but our community gets a sense of just how complicated it is to still try to do all the things that we have to do to educate students and keep them safe with these new challenges. We sent out a survey to our employees week before last. And I will tell you, my senior team and I, when we sent the survey out, we did not expect to be surprised because we have been having ongoing conversations. We've been listening deeply to our employees, and we knew what would be on that survey. And we asked them, what are the things that are causing particular challenges and pain points? What are solutions that they think can help? And then other things that they felt the need to share with us on that survey. We've had a great response, and the survey responses have been not surprising, but very important. You will not be surprised that the issue of compensation came up. And by your actions tonight, I know there are going to be a lot of employees who are going to say, the district, our board is listening, and that's going to be really, really important. But we can't stop there. We have got to do everything we can to address the challenges and pressures being felt by our employees. And the more of those challenges and pressures we can take off, the more they can do the important job that they have of educating our students well. So we want to share with you some of the things that are happening right now across the district as we are adjusting this world of COVID-19, but then more importantly, some of the things we're doing to try to better support our employees and traffic in this very unprecedented and unusual year. And we'll start with Dr. Busby.
Kind of refresh the information on the COVID tracker. We are continuing to, it's kind of the same model that we had before. We're doing the number of positive cases. You can see that for students and you can see that for employees. And then you can also see the number of students and employees that have been required to be quarantined, either because they have symptoms or maybe they were around someone that had tested positive, so then they have to quarantine for a certain number of days. So we continue to have that. We do our best to update that on a daily basis during the school days, during the Monday through Friday. The information can sometimes be delayed up to 24 hours because there is a trail that information has to follow, but we try to get that updated as quickly as possible. The COVID Rapid Response Team continues to meet daily. This team takes all of those cases that are reported and we review that information. We look at it and look at how the contact tracing went, look at the different cases, the number of days that they might have to isolate or quarantine, what are the communication needs that come from that case, and then we also consider work requests. Staff does have the ability to request the option to work remotely if their position allows for that type of setting that they can do their job remotely. So if they believe that they can submit an application for that, and then the COVID Rapid Response Team reviews those by a case-by-case basis, also with administrator input, and then based on that information, the committee then makes a decision on whether or not that can be granted. Our most recent data, in this last line you can see, our current students that have chosen remote learning, we are at 11.8% that are choosing remote. So that is in our elementary, 298 students, and at secondary, that is 755 students. So again, those are the numbers that are choosing remote. In addition to those that are choosing remote, the number can actually fluctuate too. So all of those students that we talked about before that may have to be one of those quarantine cases, if they have to quarantine, then we can move them to that remote instruction as well. So the number can fluctuate based on those needs.
All right. I get the pleasure of kind of talking about what happens when we get a report of a COVID positive teacher or student, or maybe a student that's been deemed to be of close contact with a positive, COVID positive case. The first thing that happens is administration is notified of that. And you would, a logically thinking person would think, well, then we call the health department, and the health department sends someone out and they do the contact tracing and we listen to them. But that would be what a logical person would think. We have triaged this COVID-19 group. We have learned a lot in the last 2 or 3 months. Rereading and arguing and cussing a few times and doing some stuff in that COVID room to figure this stuff out. And it has been, it's been tough, but we've got a good handle on it. I really feel like we do. And I really feel like my love-hate relationship with this thing right here has kept our schools open, and that's a good thing. And I'm going to try to explain that to you in this presentation. But once we're notified, some things are going to kick into place. The first thing they're going to do, our administration is going to contact the nurse. The campus nurse is going to enter data on a campus COVID-19 tracking document. So we've put all these documents out, 10 documents and one for the district for employees. And we have people that fill out the information on this form that's going to tell us and keep track of our cases, because it got overwhelming initially when they were starting to come in and just trickle in, and then they started to come in heavier for us. But after that, the case is then turned over to usually an administrator, which is an assistant principal on a campus, who begins the process of contact tracing. And basically what they do is they look at any situation where students were possibly not wearing a mask. And so that could be classes, depending on their age, lunches, because we got to take our mask off to eat, and we know that's a situation that's probably the most vulnerable for our students is when they're eating. So we're going to look there, and we've got ways to track where they're at in the cafeteria. Some campuses take pictures, some campuses have seating charts. So there's ways to keep track of where those students eat every day. We look at extracurricular activities where they're sometimes without a mask while they're participating in the extracurricular activity. We look at car riders because we know high school kids carpool together a lot of times. They ride with other kids' parents to school. We look at elementary, same thing. They ride with other kids or other parents to school. Hopefully the parents at elementary. And then we look at buses, and we've got cameras on buses. We've got seating charts on buses. We look at all those things and use we've been to elementary schools as a committee. We've been looking at bus videos, trying to figure out who was in contact and not, because we feel like it's really important for us to track them down, because we want to keep our schools operating, because that's what we're here to do. So once the close contacts are determined, then the administration begins the parental notification, and every parent is notified by phone that day that their student was either in close contact with the teacher or in close contact with the student that was positive. And from that point, the nurse then issues a reentry plan. It's a form that says you were exposed on this date, you can come back on this date, assuming all of these other issues are in a line. You know, you're not showing any symptoms, you've been fever-free, and those, but every kid individually gets that. And then later that afternoon, after if a positive has shown up on campus, either teacher or student, we then notify the entire campus that a positive case was on campus that day. And we also say in that letter that if your son or daughter was exposed to that positive case, you would already know. So not to worry that you're getting this letter. It's just our official notification that we did have a positive case. And that's required by TEA to do. In the case of a contact, which can happen on campus or could happen on the weekend or at night, let's say a parent becomes positive, well then the student that lives with the parent would be close contact. And so we have a protocol for that as well. It's reported to the administration. Administration enters it on the spreadsheet through the campus nurse, and then we also provide them with a reentry plan as to when they can come back to school. It's pretty labor intensive to go through this, and it pretty much happens every day on most campuses, because we have someone call and say a parent or a sibling or someone on the softball team or any kind of other team were positive. Then we have to track that back, and we have to go 48 hours from the first symptom or the first positive test if they were asymptomatic. We go 48 hours back. So if they tested on Saturday, showed no symptoms, we still have to go back 48 hours from Saturday. So that's our lunch periods on Thursday and Friday that we have to look at to see if the kid was around anyone else. Now, what does that look like in the real world?
Mr. McFadden, can we go back on the first slide? Again, I just want to emphasize on behalf of our employees the challenges that they're facing. Because when we first were getting introduced to how we could reopen schools, we were told, contact the health department and they can help you with the contact tracing, they can help you with the paperwork. The health department was very upfront to say, we can't help you with the contact tracing, you have to give us 30 days and we'll be out to help. Well, as you know, most students and staff after 10 days of having COVID or 14 days of being in close contact can be returned for campus. So by the time they could begin the process, you've already gone past that window. So we had to find a way to get that done. The nurses, as busy as they are, have to do the paperwork. So it's not just, we thought we'd be able to call and say, hey, let's report this student or this employee. We have to do a lot of paperwork to send to the health department. And then the entire process of the contact tracing, whether it's in the school, the cafeteria, the buses, as Mr. McFadden said, it takes an enormous amount of support from the entire school community. And then the secretaries and registrars and other folks having to make the phone calls to help so that parents can hear directly that yes, your child was exposed and may have had close contact so that they're not hearing that from an impersonal letter, but then we still have to send the letter to the entire school community to let them know that there was a positive case on the campus. It's just a lot. We're not complaining. It's just to help you and our community understand the tremendous burden and challenges that our educators are facing at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of time, but we realize, just like a lot of things, if we want to continue to serve our population in our buildings, we're going to do a good job with this and track them down as quickly as we can. A real life example, this happened last week, COVID-19 positive. They all blend together, and we're not giving away any specifics. So, COVID positive teacher. In classroom 1, both teachers and students were wearing masks. It was an older grade level where masks were mandated. Teacher is not at lunch or any specials with students. Therefore, no students were quarantined. It was just the one teacher that was going to have to quarantine for 10 days until all symptoms are gone, no fever, and much improved symptoms. Classroom 2, actually, there was another teacher that was positive. They were in a classroom that masks were not mandated, and none of the students were wearing masks consistently. And so it was deemed that over the course of an 8-hour day, there had been close contact with every individual in the classroom. And so the entire classroom was sent home. So 2 situations that started out similar, but were very different in the end because a lot of kids had to be quarantined at that point. At the high school, this is a secondary incident. We had one student that was positive and was reported to us. So we went back 2 lunch periods because we go 48 hours since when the symptoms first occurred. And we had 3 at lunch with them one day, and we had 2 at lunch with them on day 2. So there's 5 students that were going to have to be quarantined. And then car rider, they happened to ride with 2 other students, or 2 other students actually rode with them. They were the driver. And so there were 2 more. So that was a total of 7 students that were quarantined. They were not in athletics, bands, choir, or any extracurricular activities. And we questioned each classroom to make sure that they wore their mask consistently. And that was reported that they did. And so 1 positive student equaled 7 total quarantine students. Just imagine though, and this is not I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just telling you the way contact tracing works. If we were not wearing masks at the high school, that 1 student would have had 5 at lunch because we separate at lunch as much as we can, 2 in the car rider, and they have 4 classes a day, but over the course of 48 hours, they would have 8 classes. Each class has up to 25 kids in it. And over 2 days, that would be upwards of 200 kids. And then if you tried to do hallway traffic, which I don't know how you would do, with cameras it could be an infinite number of kids. So I'm not sure we would have buildings open if it wasn't for the cooperation of our student body to wear the mask. This isn't a mask presentation. This was a contact tracing presentation, but it directly impacts the rules that we're given to follow. And so we feel very important, and our teachers have really bought into it, and our kids have bought into it in our community. So that's a little bit of how that works. We just thought it would be interesting to give you an insight into what these administrators and teachers and principals are doing every day, as well as educating kids.
So while Ms. Graves is making her way to the podium, as I said, we are going to do everything we can to address the challenges and the burdens that have been placed on our employees and especially our teachers, and try to strive to serve best our in-person and remote students at the same time. And so we're going to share what that looks like and some of the changes that we're doing moving forward immediately.
Yes. So when we started this summer planning for remote, we challenged our teachers to please make sure that our remote learners receive the same quality instruction, the same rigor, the same expectations that our in-person learners received. Our teachers exceeded our expectations. They've done an amazing job, and I think myself and the senior leadership team will tell you that we appreciate their hard work and all that they've done. They have done an absolute amazing job. Those of you that know teachers or have been a teacher know that your school day doesn't end at the end of the day. You always have extra work to do at night. Every now and then, your day sometimes spills over into the evening. However, with what we're doing right now, we're asking our teachers to do an excessive amount of work to meet the expectations of remote, excessive, to the point of they often don't even have an evening with their family because they're trying to meet the challenges of remote. And they are doing an incredible job. We have, of course, sent out the survey. We have spent a lot of time talking with our teachers, asking them what we can do to help meet their needs, some things that we can do to help with the challenges that they're facing. And so we have listened, and we've taken that information that they have given us, and we have created some expectations for all stakeholders to hopefully help with the remote learning. So we've created these expectations, and so we'll start with the students. The students will participate daily in order to show progress. They will utilize the platform designated by the teacher to submit work, meaning that they can't just submit their work through email or text message. It has to be through the platform that was designed. They will complete independent work independently. They will complete tests within a designated time frame, and they will seek teacher support if they are struggling in class. We are asking that the parents also help us and follow expectations to respond to communication from the school within 24 hours. We're asking that they ensure that the students have designated workspace and required technology to complete the work. Of course, we've ordered the computers and the hotspots to help with that, but we need to make sure that they've checked those out and they have that available for their student. Seek teacher support if the student is struggling in class. Notify the teachers as well as the attendance office when the student plans to be absent, because we're still taking attendance. We're asking that the teachers respond to the student and parent communication within 24 hours. We're asking that the teachers be available for academic support during the school hours. So that's going to be a little bit of change. Right now, some of our teachers are available until midnight. And so we're going to set those school hours and ask that our parents be very understanding that after school hours, they're not going to be able to respond to you. They will respond the following school day. We're asking that they monitor the progress of their remote learners and offer additional support or tutoring if needed if the student is struggling in class. We are actually putting these changes into effect immediately. These will start immediately. So we will be communicating this with all stakeholders this week. We've worked, we all own communication, so we've worked very diligently this week to make sure that we have created some form of communication for every stakeholder. And so that will be done this week.
Are we planning on like sending out almost like a little contract or something?
Yes, we are going, we're going to, I'm going to get to that. Can I
Yes.
wait till that? Okay. So when we started remote learning this summer, we made the decision that we would allow our remote learners to participate in UIL or school activities. We felt like that we would offer them that opportunity. However, as we have worked through COVID and the challenge of remote, it has been very difficult to reconcile how students can participate in school and community activities that by nature that resemble close contact, but yet they cannot come to in-person learning. So therefore, we're going to ask that all remote learners, all remote students planning to continue with MISD extracurricular activities return to school next semester. We are going to, the current arrangement that they have right now will be honored through the end of this semester. So when we leave in December, we will honor that arrangement until then. But then next semester, if you would like to participate in MISD activities or extracurricular activities, UIL, you will have to return to school.
Roughly how many students are we talking about?
That's a really good question, and we've really been working to get that number. It's not as many as we think. But when you're thinking about extracurricular activities, not only do you have sports, but you have choir, you have band, you have drama, all of those activities as well. So the number does kind of creep up there when you start thinking about all of those activities, but I'm sorry, we don't have an exact number. But we are working on trying to kind of get our head around that number. Any questions about that?
I would think it's a small number, but a very visual number.
Yes.
Well put.
Yeah. So as we think about the spring and we determine how we move forward with remote learning, we have decided that we need to create a good plan. So we have decided to open an application of intent. And what is your intent for the spring? So starting November 2nd through November 13th, an application of intent will be available online. We are going to ask parents to, at that time, select for the entire spring semester their choice of remote or in-person learning. And the reason that we do that is it's very difficult, the back office work that it takes to move a child back into school, to designate a teacher. It's an incredible amount of work, not just for our teachers, but for our registrars and those people that help in the office. Oftentimes they have to change teachers, so it's not a great plan for the students either. So we want the parents to please commit for the spring semester. In the contract, as we get those in, we are going to look at how did they do in the fall. Considerations will be made on, were they successful during remote learning this fall? Were they passing? Did they turn in their work? That sort of thing. Was their attendance good? So those considerations will be made. If for some reason an application is denied, there is an appeal process for that with the COVID committee. So yes, we are going to have an application process and kind of sign off on those standards.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Now, this, of course, the application will go out November 2nd, and it will wrap up November 13th to begin the second semester. The reason we're kind of doing that so early is we want to have plenty of time to plan appropriately for the spring semester.
I think it would be good to make sure to communicate that their participation and how they're doing the semester is going to affect whether they are allowed to do it next semester.
Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely. Any questions? So that's kind of our plan moving forward as we move to the spring semester. We also hope that these expectations that we put in place will answer the cry of our teachers and let them know that we're listening to them and we hear the challenges that they're facing, and we're hoping that it does make their situation better. Okay. Thank you.
Another slide. All right. So another initiative that we want to share that will start to be communicated are to try to meet the unique needs of our secondary campuses. Every employee and every family has had a different experience with COVID-19 in our district, across the state, across the country. I will say in Montgomery ISD, it is profoundly felt at the secondary campuses for a number of different reasons. Our secondary, at the elementary, we've been able to find a way to have 14 dedicated teachers who teach remote students. And the rest of our teachers at the elementary campus teach their traditional in-person students. And that's taken a lot of work. It has taken a lot of focus, but we've been able to do that, and that has taken a lot of pressure off of our elementary teachers having to do both a hybrid approach of in-person and remote. That has not been the case at the secondary level. If you think about the number of subjects, how many offerings within a subject area, the sheer number of teachers, and so our teachers on the secondary campuses teach their traditional and then also have to do in person. We have been very fortunate to have already planned a block schedule initiative, and that has really helped us successfully maneuver this year, but that's another initiative that our teachers have had to plan for. And quite frankly, some of the challenges in doing their remote lessons, if they had their old schedule, they could have just taken out a lesson, put it through Google Classroom, but now they're having to create the new lesson for the block schedule and then format it for Google Classroom. So it has put a tremendous strain on our secondary teachers. And so we've had lots of conversations about what can we do to better serve our employees and also our students. So we're going to pilot, and I want to emphasize the word pilot, a late arrival initiative. Something a number of districts have done some models of. And what will happen is starting on November the 4th, going through December the 9th, students will arrive to campus about 2.5 hours later than they normally would. They will have work requirements to come into the school with, so it's not an opportunity for them to sleep late. It's simply working at home and then coming with the work assigned. That will give our secondary teachers time to do collaborative planning. It will allow them to reach out to both their in-person and remote families and learners to make sure that they are progress monitoring and doing all the things that will better support instruction in the classroom and for remote learners. We're excited about this. We think it's going to be an opportunity for us to see how this would work. And is it something, as we're looking ahead to calendars next year, so we want to incorporate some aspect of it, or is it simply something that right now, as teachers are still making that transition at the secondary level, is something that we just do for the first semester? So we will announce that starting tomorrow. We will certainly accommodate families that are having trouble with needing to drop off students early, but we really feel like this will be something that will be valued and needed by our teachers. And we will certainly update the board in terms of how it's working out.
How will the buses work?
The buses will use the elementary routes first, and then they will then do the secondary routes. So they just basically will flip-flop. And it comes at no additional cost either. That's if we done a early dismissal, there would have been a cost, but the late arrival to campus comes at no additional cost.
And we're not losing instructional minutes.
No, ma'am. I'm glad you asked that question, and I should have put that out there because, again, it is not an additional 2.5 hours, correct, Dr. Scher, for students to sleep in. There will be academic expectations, there will be assignments, and so students will not have a loss of instructional minutes. Thank you.
Dr. Morrison, so if it's truly a pilot, are we going to collect any information or, how people feel about it? What are we going to do there?
Most definitely. We are going to reach out and first of all gauge how it's working for our campuses. Mr. McFadden and I were at a middle school today, and we were having some initial conversations, and we were already getting some input if this were something that we were to go ahead with, how we would be able to monitor the success. We certainly want to come back and survey our parents and students to see how it worked out for them. And again, it's just really trying to utilize time in a different way, but in a way that we think will keep our students and our teachers focused on the expectations that we have.
Thank you. I hear a lot of folks asking about innovative calendars, so I'm glad we're starting to look at something like that.
Any other questions from the board? Anything else?
No, sir. We started with Mr. Lynn. We're going to end with Mr. Lynn. So.
Yep. So we have the monthly financials report.
It's going to take me longer to walk up there than it is to... You have this month's report in your packet, but I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board?
All right, thank you.
Okay. With that, thank you, Chris. With that, the board is going to go into closed meeting as authorized by the Texas Opens Meetings Act to talk about the items that we have there on the agenda. Coming back from closed session into the open session, do I have a motion?
I move to approve real estate transaction as presented in closed session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Meeting adjourned.